Good day, everyone. Thank you for being here with us today. My name is Randy Odebrowski. I am the Chief Operating Officer for Good Days, a leading patient advocacy nonprofit and the organizing force behind Chronic Disease Day. I am very excited to kick off this year's Chronic Disease Day initiatives with this special caregiver-focused event. Chronic Disease Day is recognized on 7/10 due to chronic diseases accounting for 7 out of the top 10 leading causes of death in America. The most staggering thing about this statistic is the majority of these deaths are preventable. Our charge through assistance, awareness, and education is to lower the number of preventable illness in this country and apply resources to treatments and cures of unpreventable chronic illness. We are hosting events all year leading up to Chronic Disease Day to raise awareness and provide education and support on what we can do as a community to alter behaviors that have negative effects on overall health. You can find more information about Chronic Disease Day, watch our live stream series, tell us who motivates you to stay strong, or share your favorite healthy recipes at chronicdiseaseday.org. We hope that you will check it out. Our initiatives promote everyday wellness and caregiving for ourselves and each other. Together, we can build healthier communities and better support those with unpreventable conditions too. Today, we are recognizing those who give so much of themselves to support their loved ones, the caregivers. As everyone who is watching can appreciate, caregivers often face impossible challenges, especially over this past year. And more often than not, caregivers are so focused on their loved ones to give themselves the attention and self-care they truly need to stay strong and feel good. With that in mind, we have gathered an excellent group of speakers who can share their experience on what it means to be a caregiver, tips to help other caregivers, and reflections on the state of caregiving in America today. In the next hour, you will hear from leading voices on caregiving, including the National Alliance for Caregiving CEO, Grace Juneau-Whiting, Share the Care author, Sheila Warnock, caregiver experts, Nadine Roberts-Cornish and Danelle LeBlanc, cancer survivor and radio show host, Kim Adams, National Breast Cancer Foundation Ambassador, Raj Patel, and our own Good Days President and CEO, Clarinda Wally. But before that, we are going to take a moment to practice mindfulness and self-care all together. We are pleased to have with us one of the top wellness experts, Andrea Marcellus, who is going to help energize and empower us for today's session. Andrea has spent more than 25 years getting people to their goals while cultivating their time and energy. Andrea, we are so grateful you can join us today.
Hi there. Thank you so much, Randy. It's wonderful to be here, and I'm so excited. One of my passions is helping people. And as Randy said, I've spent, almost 30 years in this industry helping people get to their best. And I especially love taking care of caregivers because I specialize in wellness for busy, overwhelmed people. And that is especially this audience here today. So let's get right to it. I want to show you how you can generate energy instantly in 1 minute on a day when you feel like you have nothing left in the tank. You want to know a really great tip and trick for that? Let's go do it right now. Okay, so you're going to stay at your chair wherever you are right now, and all I want you to do is just come up about 5 inches off your chair. So you'll just hover off your chair. Just like that. Okay, and then from here, we're going to take our arms out and around and hold them up right here. So this is called chair pose from yoga. And in this position, you can feel it already. Your legs are starting to demand oxygen. Your heart is starting to pick up. And when we get oxygen flowing through our body, that instantly generates energy, that instantly nourishes our cells in our muscles and also in our brain. Now we're going to move this. So you're going to go inhale up, exhale, drop back down, almost to your chair, not all the way, and inhale up and exhale back down. So now what we're doing is connecting breath to movement. Why? because not only is this going to instantly energize your body, I know you feel that transition already. I know you feel that physical focus already. But once we get going like this just for a minute or so, it also refocuses your mind. Here's the beautiful thing. Your mind cannot multitask. So while you are busy focusing, connecting breath on this movement, it shuts down the amygdala in your brain. That is the fear and anxiety center. That is the to-do list you'll never get through. That is all the worries you have. So right now in this moment, not only are we energizing your body, but we're reframing your mind into a place of possibility and into a place of problem solving and into a place where you can be at your absolute best for the people most important to you. Okay, take a rest. Now, just sit there for a second, have a sip of water if you have it handy, and notice, how do you feel? Do you feel that vitality? So what we did was we lifted our chest. Anything that opens this area of the body will instantly energize you. If you can't do that movement, then just take your hands behind you in your chair, your fingertips forward, and just press down and open and breathe. Inhale, exhale, 2 more. Inhale, exhale, and last one. Inhale and exhale. You should feel great. So there you go. Those are 2 very, very easy ways. One with movement, connecting movement to breath, and one is just a simple stretch if you can't move anywhere, and there you are. But I hope that you see that this is available to you all the time. It didn't cost you anything. You didn't have to change your clothes. You didn't have to go anywhere. All you have to do is get in that chair pose, up and down a little bit, connect your breath to movement, and you will mentally and physically be in a different place to be your best for those who need you the most. Okay, so I hope you feel different and ready to go. And right now, I am going to kick it over to an amazing woman. This is Kim Adams. She is a radio host. She is a cancer survivor. She is a mother of 5 and a caregiver herself. And I know she is going to lead us through a really important and generous conversation today. So take it away, Kim.
Well, you forgot to say, and she's super stressed because until about 2 seconds ago, her camera didn't work. And so I have to go back and do Andrea's breathing. I'm going to age myself for a second because there you go. I just put 10 years on my life. I can't see a thing without them. I want to welcome our amazing group of panelists. We have Nadine Roberts-Cornish, Danelle LeBlanc, and Raj Patel. Welcome. To keep things moving, what I thought I would do was introduce each of you individually, tell a little about yourself, and I'll ask you a few questions. So I want to start with Raj. Raj Patel is a caregiver to his wife, a breast cancer survivor, who is in recovery, and he now serves as an ambassador and spokesperson for the National Breast Cancer Foundation. In his professional career, Raj is an executive and leadership development consultant at Toyota North America. Welcome, Raj. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks so much, Kim. It's an honor to be here. What a great event and a wonderful panel that I get to participate with. So thank you.
You're so welcome. And first and foremost, how is your wife doing?
She's doing fantastic. We're 7 years into remission, and that is great.
Excellent, excellent. I know I'm getting close to my 5-year mark, and I know that's a big celebration. Well, talk to us a little bit about your experience and your perspective as a caregiver.
Absolutely. So, you know, I'm here to provide some context, right? I think especially for me, one of the things I'd like to share with this audience and others is, you know, something that Randy talked about. You know, the caregivers are so often focused on themselves, and there isn't much space for self-reflection. And my perspective also with this panel today is, especially in the breast cancer area, being a male, being a partner and a supporter, there's a real absence of awareness and support for men at this time. But I think a lot of this applies to all caregivers, right? When you're providing care, there's very little from a system standpoint to support the caregiver and to ask, how are you doing, and how to take time for yourself so that you can maintain your health and wellness so that you can be the best provider. So it's been a great journey. I now say, and from my wife's point of view, she has said this, and we share this now, that cancer is a lifetime commitment. And I've added to that it's a family commitment, because cancer, while she went through it, certainly she did, every moment of that became something we all had to deal with and process. And we were all supporting her. And quite frankly, and again, I just want to open up this idea that we all survived cancer in this family. So that's kind of my perspective. Happy to share and love to hear all the other great perspectives today.
Well, I understand exactly what you're saying, because as the mother of 5, a single mom of 5 going through breast cancer, the most important thing to me was that my kids during that time, it's going to sound strange, but they were selfish, which actually helped me, because the little ones, they still wanted breakfast, lunch, dinner. They still expected to be taken to their activities. And, at that age, when they're 4 and 5 years old, the world revolves around them, as it should. And they're the reason, their selfishness in that way almost is what forced me to get out of bed in the morning, because I had to. They didn't give me another option. Mom can't stay in bed and cry all day because we have to get to soccer. And they were very supportive as well. I don't want to make it sound like they're selfish kids, but you understand what I'm saying. It's keeping their lives as normal as possible is what really helped me. And it sounds like it helped you as well. We have to ask how many kids you have. What is your family?
So we have 2 girls, and at the time, they were much younger. Now they're in high school, so every day is an adventure.
Yeah.
But you're absolutely right. I think, and the other way what you're saying to me resonates is purpose, right? Having that daily purpose, having a reason to get up and to get out of bed, as opposed to just being in that moment, right? There's a greater cause for all of us. And I think especially in these times, that's what we're all seeing. And there's so much great conversation about how can we help the world? How can we help others? This allyship, this partnership. So I think this is such a great platform today. I think this is the perfect time for this conversation.
I absolutely agree. And you talked about helping. What can we do to help specifically male caregivers? Because as you said earlier, it's a different dynamic.
Yeah. And I will say this is not an easy one, but there are some things we can do. And it's not easy because I think men have been raised in many cultures, and there's a very broad statement by this that we don't ask for a lot of help. That's part one. And as a care provider, you're expected to be the rock. You're supposed to just be solid, right? Which is true across the board, man or woman. But what can people do is just that, and again, this word of allyship that we're hearing so much about these days and for the last year, it really kind of resonated and connected to me that I think people, when they lead with their heart and they just ask the question in a genuine sense of how are you doing? And then from there can take that sense of how can I do something for you or think of you, right? That idea of empathy. So in my case, let's make it real specific very quickly. While I was going through it and she was the patient and all, of course, the attention is her, how she's feeling. But quite frankly, people go, how are you doing? But nobody really wanted to hear how tough it was. They're like, okay, come on, Raj, let's settle down for a minute.
Right.
She's the patient. You just get to be here. But there really wasn't that kind of someone to talk to in terms of, this is hard. I'm scared. I'm emotional, right? I'm questioning, my faith even, because why would this happen? There's a lot of stuff to process. And just by having someone be there to ask that question, to be a receiving place, a safe place to be open with that, would have meant the world to me. And that's really what I'm advocating now is it's not some major shift. It's just reaching out with what we already do for one another and creating that space for people to share themselves, to let down their guard, and then to realize they're not alone, right? We know that, but it really takes that extra little conversation. And then you just 5 minutes later, you're all good.
I agree. And I think it's the way you phrase the question. When you ask someone, how are you doing? It's almost an obligatory, fine, I'm okay, tired. So what I learned was when I help people battling cancer or whatever it is, I don't really give them that option. I specifically say, what can I do for you? Is it A, B, or C? And they just have to choose one. They don't really give them the option of saying fine or nothing, I'm good. I say, okay, so do you want me to bring you dinner? Do you want to just unload on me? Or do you want to just sit and cry together? And they have to choose one of those three, because we're not going to go with the option of, especially women, we deal with this all the time. I'm fine, I'm good, nothing. But as you said, Raj, I think we need to pay attention to the fact that men have those feelings too, and that you're going through it as well. So thank you so much. Blessings to you and your family and your wife, and continued good health.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, Nadine, you are up next. Nadine Roberts-Cornish is the founder of the Caregiver's Guardian, which is TCG, a Denver, Colorado-based consulting service dedicated to supporting and guiding and advocating for the family caregiver. And her most important role to date was a 15-year caregiver to her mother, Elizabeth, and this inspired her first book, Tears in My Gumbo, The Caregiver's Recipe for Resilience. And her recent book, which just came out this summer, I'm so excited about it, Prayers in My Gumbo, The Caregiver's Recipe for Peace. Welcome, Nadine.
Oh, thank you so much, Kim. Thank you to this amazing panelist, and good day for making this event happen. I'm thrilled to be here.
Well, we are thankful to have you, and I'm so excited about these books because having lived in the South in Mississippi and Louisiana, gumbo is right up my alley. And you have combined this with caregiving in just really two amazing books. And in those books, you talk about 5 steps of conscious caregiving. Explain to me what those steps are and what caregivers need to know.
Okay, so first I'll share with you my definition of conscious caregiving. Conscious caregiving is caring on purpose with intention and a plan. So the first thing that I do with my caregivers is make sure that they understand that concept and embrace the idea of consciously caring. And then from there, we go into the 5 steps of conscious caregiving. Now, I want to warn you, though, even though I'm going to list them in a certain order, they can happen in any way at any time, okay? So I'm going to start with the first step, which is helplessness. Everybody knows that. Deer in the headlights, don't know what to do, and you're paralyzed. But you only get to be on that step for just a very short period of time. And from helplessness, you go to recognition. Recognition that you don't know what you don't know, and that as competent as you are in every other facet of your life, when it comes to family caregiving, all bets are off, and you have a lot to learn. You have resources to identify, and you've got people that you need to surround yourself with in order to support you through this process. And I just said the next step, which is process. Process is it's the gumbo. It's all of the stuff that goes into navigating the caregiving journey. It's what you need to learn, resources you need to identify, navigating the healthcare system, becoming abreast and really well informed of your loved one's illness so that you know the questions to ask. You become an advocate during the process. You also recognize that self-care must be the most important care that you provide, all part of process. You also, and I love what Rod said, you doing this caregiving journey, you got to come to grips with your faith, your spirituality. Something bigger than yourself has to help you navigate this process. And then once you've taken a deep breath, and the next step you find yourself at is acceptance. Acceptance that as amazing as we all are, and caregivers are incredible, we have to recognize that we are not in control, that there is a greater power that's in control. And so when we get to acceptance, we really begin to breathe. We begin to trust the process. And then finally, it's surrender. Surrender is the final step, where you recognize not my will, but thy will be done. And you bless and release in surrender. And you really move into a place of peace. There are like I said earlier, this is a cyclical process. Those are 5 steps that I've identified, and there's so many things that go within those steps. And in the first book, Tears in My Gumbo, all of the stories identify one or more of those steps. And then in the newest book, Prayers in My Gumbo, we've got caregivers from across the country who shared their stories, their prayers, and just their truth around what they learned and how they grew spiritually. And the 5 steps of conscious caregiving are woven throughout that process.
Just, I mean, a wealth of information in those books, and they're very easy to read, which when you're a caregiver, you're exhausted.
Yes.
And what I found with those books is that it has to be an easy read. And your books really do kind of nail down a call to action and the specific steps that you need to take. We all know what we're supposed to do, right? We're supposed to take care of ourselves. We know about self-care, but how do we do that specifically? And that's what you really, to me, address in the book, is the specific steps that you need to take as a caregiver. It's almost like when we know with healthy lunches for our kids that an apple is better than chips. We know that, but how do you get them to eat the apple and not the chips? So I love your books. I think it's just really incredible what you've done. But there's one thing that I know I struggle with. I recently became a caregiver to my own mom after my father passed away suddenly in January. And one of the biggest struggles is, how do you find joy? Where's the joy? You're exhausted, you're tired. How do you find that light inside and that joy?
Kim, that's such an important question, and I'm so glad you asked it, because I get asked that question all the time. And oftentimes people are really desperate to understand, where's the joy in this? Where is the joy? And the joy, I always say, is an inside job. And so you have got to take care of you so that joy can radiate inside and radiate outwardly, right? And so it's basic. It's very, very basic. There is no magic, anything other than recognition that I must put on my own oxygen mask first. Because if I'm depriving myself, I am depriving everybody else, right? And if I choose to take care of me first and make sure that my most essential needs are met, then when I wake up in the morning, I'm waking up a bit more refreshed. I'm waking up with a recognition that I got to tap into my source, whatever that is. For some people, it's nature. It's going outside for a walk. For some people, it's prayer or meditation. For others, it's listening to music, because music is so incredibly uplifting. But finding that thing that's specifically for you. I've got one client, her thing is pulling weeds, and it cracks me up. She loves to pull weeds. That's where she finds her joy. And I can't deny her that, right? And so that's for her, and that feeds her soul, and it gives her what she needs so that she's fortified in order to take care of her loved one. So yes, joy is an inside job.
I get it. You pull one and then you can't stop. An hour later, you're still pulling. But do you think too, Nadine, that part of it is figuring out what brings you joy? Because sometimes you don't know even before you became a caregiver. I always laugh when people say, well, what are your hobbies? Oh my gosh,
what
5 kids and work. What is a hobby? I've almost forgotten what does bring me joy. Right. So do you think that's part of it, is just that self-reflection of, I don't even know anymore?
Absolutely.
What do you say to people who say, I don't really know what brings me joy? Nothing brings me joy right now.
So the beautiful thing about the caregiving journey, Kim, is that it is a transformative process. You are not chosen to become a caregiver and remain the same and be who you are or be who you've always been. Caregiving is going to change you, like it or not. And no matter what you do, you can't resist that. So if you didn't know joy before, then the change that caregiving will bring is that fact and that reality that you get to tap into it. You get to decide for yourself what is joy, because it's nothing like taking care of a loved one that really, it brings you to that moment of recognition that, wow, how am I living my life? Am I living my life on purpose, with purpose, right? And so tapping into and identifying what your joy is absolutely essential, because you'll need to tap into that joy to bring that joy to your loved one that you're caring for and everybody else that's part of that caregiving family.
And I love what you said. It just resonates with me. Is that self-care is an inside job. I think that's what really sticks with me because it really is. So thank you so much, Nadine.
Thank you, Kim.
Again, if you want to get Nadine's books, she has 2 of them, Tears in My Gumbo, The Caregiver's Recipe for Resilience, and her most recent book, which just launched in the summer of 2020, Prayers in My Gumbo, The Caregiver's Recipe for Peace. So thank you so much again, Nadine. All right, Danelle LeBlanc, you are up next. You're a certified senior advisor and caregiving consultant. Danelle merges her experience as a caregiving for her father-in-law with 20 plus years in educational training and patient support services relating to aging and chronic illness. Danelle is the founder and owner of Caregiver Transitions, LLC, a grant award recipient of the North Central Texas Area Agency on Aging to deliver training to individuals who care for and work with older adults. How are you, Danelle?
I'm well, Kim. How are you?
I'm doing very, very well. Happy to have you as part of our panel. You know, so our healthcare system focuses so much on asking patients and care recipients questions about their health status and care needs. So what questions do we or should we be asking family caregivers to support them and sustain their caregiving?
Yes. So thank you so much for asking that question, because a lot of times we may not even know what the answer is as a family caregiver when we're working with healthcare providers or other people who are part of our support network. And so the added value of asking some of these questions is that we don't necessarily have to have an answer, but it might spark an idea or give a perspective that we would not have otherwise thought of because we're so overwhelmed with the immediacy of caregiving. So some examples might be, number one that comes to mind is what kind of training do we need as family caregivers to help us to care for our loved ones? So we previously touched on this point that more than half of family caregivers are performing some kind of medical task at home for their family member, for their loved one, without training. And so it's a real blind spot that we have within our healthcare system that healthcare providers and others can help fill by asking that question and then providing resources and community organizations that can help fill that gap. We can ask what kind of resources, along those same lines, what kind of resources are we aware of that can help to improve home safety for ourselves and for our loved one? So it may be home modifications, it may be assistive devices, just something as simple as assistive utensils so that we can help to empower a loved one who we're caring for who may not otherwise be able to eat a meal on their own. So those sorts of things. Who is available to help make some personal time for us? It's almost like giving permission. It's opening that door that we deserve to have that personal time. And so it's just like the shift. I think both Raj and Nadine mentioned it. It's like a shift in perspective that reflects back, and that helps us to internalize the messages that we tell ourselves that we actually deserve some personal time. How are we managing with the emotional impact of our family members' diagnosis? So Again, to Raj's point about it's not just our loved one who's receiving that diagnosis and going through this emotional process. It's also us as family caregivers. What do you need to help ease the strain of daily care? So again, all of these questions are not necessarily those that we may have an answer to as family caregivers, but they can help plant a seed to help us then seek out these resources, whether that's something that a healthcare provider can provide, that's within our a local community organization, our neighbors, and so on. And just something else I wanted to add here that I just scribbled down right before this webinar is that in the event we may have an encounter with a healthcare provider where they may not have received training or information or insight into what questions to ask us as family caregivers. So one of the things that we can do as caregivers is to prepare ahead of time those things that we need help with, so that when we walk into the doctor's office with our loved one, we can say to them, for example, I created this caregiving notification form. You can download it on the site, but it has a list of my concerns and help requests as a family caregiver, such as, okay, how can you help me with respite care, getting a break? What about home safety and maintenance, the financial strain, identifying my stress level, help with discharge instructions, and so on and so forth. So those things that when we're preparing, we, a lot of us have, a binder or a notebook where we keep all of our notes, everything and anything about our loved one. Well, what about also having a companion notebook for our concerns and our needs, so that when we walk in and we're focused on, making sure that we're taking care of our family member, and maybe we're overwhelmed with, because of the travel and the logistics and all of that, we have something in hand to remind us, okay, these are the things that I need to ask about to make sure that I get the care I need to sustain caregiving.
Well, and I think people need to know too that it's okay that you get help as well. I think so many of us feel that guilt of, oh, it's not about me. I'm not the one that's sick. It's all about them. But it is about you as well. And I also want to briefly touch on just having a care plan, because this is something that was lacking in my family. Even though I had aging parents, on Saturday, I was a working mom. And on Monday, I was a full-time caregiver and a working mom.
Yes.
And there was no in between. And you talk about the training. There must be at least 2 or 3 times a day, I think, is this in my wheelhouse? Am I qualified to be giving this medication or this shot or this? I'm not prepared. But now with my mom, now we have more of a plan. We've, in the last few months, kind of developed a plan, but it would have been much easier having that plan in place before this happened.
Right. Yes. And it's no wonder you were unprepared when you went from, within a period of hours, days, to all of a sudden having these additional obligations and responsibilities on top of already complete and full life.
Right. So
yes.
people, so are there ways to kind of develop a plan? Are there steps that people should be taking when it's inevitable? You know your parents are aging, or a family member that was just diagnosed. Just talk to me about that. Are there resources for people to help develop a care plan?
Absolutely. And, because of the increased focus on caregiving, there are a lot of really wonderful organizations that can provide a care plan. You can ask your healthcare provider. One of the benefits of a care plan is, I believe, is that it's especially effective to help support self-care when it's used as a basis for conversation. conversation with the loved one that we're caring for, with other people in the family, with others who are involved or have a concern for our loved one's well-being. And so what happens is, so I'm just going to briefly pivot to the point about that Nadine made about us being so competent in other aspects of our life. And that really resonated with me because, you know, most caregivers, it feels like most caregivers that I've worked with and that I interact with are very competent people.
Yeah.
And so when you are a competent person, you have this idea of self-sufficiency, right? Okay, like I got it. I'm taking care of it. It's done in the background. You don't need to talk about it. You just did it. You already done it. You've already done it, right?
Right.
And so, but in order for self-care to work in caregiving, it requires community support and involvement. It requires involvement of our family members and others in our network, our close network. And so in the process of discussing all of these aspects of caregiving, the time, the energy, the financial resources, the home environment, the health, everything, all these aspects, when you involve other family members, then they're going to be able to better support and value the work of caregiving, and to be able to help them identify ways that they can help that may not have come to their attention otherwise. And so you've carved out this time. And although for you, you know, in your situation where it was like, you know, you turn around and there it is, you know, to be aware that you can develop a care plan at any time as care needs change. So just because you didn't have one to start with, just like you did, you later developed a care plan. And once you had that established, then things work better. So whatever care plan that you know, however you want to create a care plan, I highly recommend that. It really helps to create a foundation for sustainable caregiving and self-care. And so with that in mind, I specifically created what I call a family caregiving plan that not only addresses the daily care needs and resources for the loved ones that we care for, but also simultaneously in each one of these categories that we're talking about, simultaneously also addresses the needs and resources for us as family caregivers, for our own well-being and confidence as family caregivers. And so, you know, whatever care plan that you develop, that's something to consider.
Great. Thank you so much, Danelle, Nadine, and Raj. Thank you all for being part of this panel. You have provided so much information, not just to me, but to our entire audience. And I'm sure that we'll have links and ways to connect to all of you and what you do so that you can continue the conversation. But thank you again. Many blessings. Continued health again, Raj, to your wife and to all your families.
Yes.
God bless you all.
Thank you, Kim. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much.
Okay,
Danny.
bye-bye. I want to bring, you're welcome, Raj. Take care. So I want to bring in Grace Whiting. She is the president and CEO of the National Alliance for Caregiving, a Washington nonprofit. It's an organization whose mission is to build partnerships in research, advocacy, and innovation to make life better for family caregivers. Welcome, Grace. How are you?
I'm great. Welcome, Kim. Thank you so
Well,
much for having me.
That is probably one of the most awesome backgrounds I have seen on a call.
Thank
Look
you.
at the fireplace and the monitor. That's awesome.
Yes,
looks very, very cozy.
Well, that's what I was thinking as we're spending our lunch hour together, and want to invite you into my home and while we chat.
Well, I love that. Absolutely. So talk to me a little bit about kind of the makeup of caregiving in America today and how that's changed dramatically in the past, not just the past year with COVID, but in the past several years.
So we do a study with AARP roughly every 5 years, going all the way back to 1997. And in that study, we asked that exact question, Kim. We asked, what is it that makes up the family caregiving movement in the US? And so the last version of this study came out last May in 2020, and we found that there are 53 million Americans who are caring for an adult or a child with a healthcare need, a functional disability, or even just because of aging. And as you can see on this graphic here, that's all different generations. You know, we think about caregiving as being an older, caring for an older person, typically a woman who might be in the middle of her career or, late 40s, early 50s. But the reality is that everybody from Generation Z all the way to the greatest generation are caregiving. And we know that when we compare this to 5 years ago, that there's 9.5 million more people taking on care, that they're caring longer, and they're more likely to be caring for multiple people.
And how has it, typically you mentioned, we think of women and middle-aged women as caregivers. In fact, as the mother of 5, I have a daughter who's the oldest and then 4 boys. And inevitably people will say, oh, you have a daughter. Oh, good. You'll have someone to take care of you one day. Well, what about my 4 sons? They're perfectly capable of taking care of them as well. So talk to me about who are today's family caregivers and the makeup of those groups. It's, as you said, it's changed.
Absolutely. And Raj spoke to this a little bit before. I think to some degree that men are sort of almost invisible caregivers because we don't always recognize the types of care activities that men are doing. Now, we know in general from the study that we do with AARP that about 60% of America's caregivers are women and another 40% are men. There's some variation in there, particularly with people who may be other gender identities. But I raise this because I always think of sort of the dishwasher problem of when you move in with someone and or you get married and you're arguing over how to do the dishes. And, you have a way you want the dishes, the forks go upright, the knives go knife down.
Right.
And then your roommate takes on the dishes and suddenly everything is chaos.
Right.
And I think what happens for a lot of men is they do care activities, but it maybe doesn't look the same way that a woman might take on those activities. And so we don't always notice the work that they're doing in the background.
Right. Absolutely. I would just be happy for anybody to do the dishes in my house at this point. Fork up or fork down. I wouldn't really care. So talk to me about some of the trends in caregiving and how we can make caregiving more sustainable in challenging times.
The biggest trend, I think, is more awareness and more people doing it. And COVID has definitely amplified this. We see people talking about caregiving. We see policymakers trying to grapple with paid family medical leave and how are we going to help people who are caregivers. And when it comes to this question about sustainability that you raise, part of this is that question of how do we care for the caregivers? It's not reasonable or realistic even to say that we're going to expect every caregiver to raise their hand, to come into every doctor appointment, knowing exactly what to do, to be able to have that tough conversation with your boss about needing time off. And so what we're excited about is that Congress and the Department of Health and Human Services is really working to create a plan. What is the national plan for caregiving? And how do we give people what they need, whether it's at work, at home, so that they can really thrive, not only in the role they do as a caregiver, but also on their own right and their own right to self-determination.
Are there certain things in that report that gave you hope or also things that made you worry?
I felt hopeful learning about caregivers who say that they find meaning and purpose in their role. And what's really interesting is as we talk about health equity in families that are Latino or families that are African American or Black American, they tend to say that they find more meaning and purpose out of the role. And that tends to be because they, as a subculture, if we're aggregating the data And of course, there's no one size fits all. But in general, there's a community celebration and honor for taking care of other people in your life. When you move away from that sort of expected role, it sometimes feels like more of a strain, or you feel like you were forced into caregiving. The flip side is if you think that you're a caregiver and it's just part of your role as wife, as daughter, as brother, as cousin or friend, you're less likely to ask for help. And so that's one of those areas that people need help. And especially in this post-COVID world, navigating technology is another, managing finances, and really working on connection with other people so that it's not such a lonely or isolating experience.
You know, you touched on the finances, and as we put up some of those graphics, you notice the increase in the amount of caregivers. What are the economic effects of caregiving for families?
There's a big financial impact. You know, most of the caregivers, when we looked at it in the United States, most caregivers are working, roughly 6 out of 10. And of those, the majority have experienced some type of impact on their work life. We tend to think about, oh gosh, how am I going to make ends meet this month? But there's also a long-term impact of that. So if you reduce your hours or step out of the workforce, that might impact your own retirement, your ability to pay for your long-term care. And I think there's that multi-generational piece where what will the impact be on your kids if you have difficulty coming back into the workforce, or if you're having challenges even with things like food security. That's something that more recent studies in the last year have found, that food security was a major pain point for families because caregivers often couldn't find nutritious food, or they were using takeout because they were so tired and they weren't able to eat healthy. And that, of course, also comes with an increased cost. So it's a real opportunity for people to reach out and ask caregivers, hey, can I help? And for people who are employers to say, hey, can I help accommodate you and make it possible for you to care for this person and also continue to work here?
I'm sure that resonates with a lot of people watching that are both caregivers or people watching that have a chronic illness. You're exhausted. And so the last thing you want to do is go to the grocery store, come home and cook a nutritious meal. It's easier to just, especially in today's world with all the different companies that deliver right to your door, to just get a carry out and have it come to the door. And it's expensive. It adds up very quickly. And obviously it's not as healthy for people. So are there ways to sort of, can you prepare financially? Are there different programs and things that you can do to prepare for becoming a caregiver?
To some degree, yes. I think having those planning conversations, you know, Kim, you mentioned earlier, you wish you'd had a plan in place before you were sort of in this situation. So I think having those conversations early and often, I think making those social connections and realizing maybe you're not the primary caregiver, maybe you care for a caregiver. So just the value of bringing over, in the food example, a home cooked meal. I mean, I hear so many times people say, you know, oh, I'm caring for my son who has schizophrenia and it's not a casserole disease. You know, nobody's coming by to say, hey, are you okay? And I think those small check-ins are critical in order to weather just the impact of both chronic disease and caring for somebody with the chronic disease. There's also, I think, a piece here about listening and making sure that people feel heard. I mean, that was something that shocked me in our study, was if you lived with a person you're taking care of, you were more likely to say that you felt alone. And that to me says it's not about proximity to other people. It's about feeling heard and understood and having somebody that can kind of be with you for part of that journey. And sometimes the person you're taking care of just isn't in the space where they can be that partner. So finding outside help when you can.
Well, yeah, and it would be just a daily reminder that there's someone else there, but they can't communicate with you and support you, but they're there.
Yeah.
Wow, I didn't really think about that, and I love your analogy of it's not a casserole disease. I use that example with breast cancer. When I had breast cancer, I mean, daily meals. People just set up a whole system of making sure that we had food. But I had several friends, in fact, who were going through different types of issues with whether it's mental illness, or they had a child who struggled with mental illness or domestic violence. No one brings you a casserole when you're going through some of those issues. And so that's a great point. And it's a good reminder for all of us that instead of asking somebody what they need, well, we're telling you what they need. They probably need a healthy, nutritious meal. So instead of asking, just say, what day would you like me to bring whatever it is? Instead of saying, hey, do you want me to get you dinner? No, I'm fine. Don't worry about it. We got it. Just say, what night would you like me to bring it to you? So is there anything else from the study that you kind of want to highlight or talk to people about before we go?
I think the big thing is just that the demographics of caregiving is changing, and that there's a lot of multicultural elements of it. I think overall it's a positive thing that people want to take care of someone they love, whether that's a person you're married to, or a friend, or a neighbor, or a distant relative. And that relationship is bi-directional. So I think one of the big takeaways for us was when we look at places that are pain points like care coordination, and then we think about what happened with COVID and how tricky it's been to kind of navigate all the new roles and all the new places and ways to get healthcare. If there's a way for people who design programs for caregivers and lawmakers who create new incentives on the federal level or the state level to make that path a little bit easier, it will give back time to families to deal with the really sticky existential stuff that no law or workplace program is ever going to solve. You know, give people back the time. We can't fix if someone you love is in pain, but what we can fix is the pain of being on the phone with the insurance company for 2 hours, or having to reconcile bills from 3 different providers, or trying to figure out where the medical record is. And by doing that, we can give people back some time to really be with that person.
And I can tell you that is, you know this as well, that is the most precious thing, is time. And you're right, you don't want to be on the phone trying to figure out, you have enough trying to schedule doctor's appointments and do the daily care, but to be the stress of fighting with insurance companies and things like that, just have someone take that stress off of a caregiver is invaluable. So we appreciate you and all the work that the NAC does. If those of you listening or watching would like more information on the NAC, you can find it at www.caregiving.org. We will obviously put links and provide those resources. But thank you so much, Grace, for being with us and for all the work that your organization does for caregivers. We really do appreciate you.
Thank you. And thank you, Kim, for all that you're doing as well.
You're so welcome. Well, up next, I love Sheila. Some of you might even know Sheila. We are so pleased to have the opportunity to hear from Sheila Warnock, who's a recognized trailblazer in supporting caregivers everywhere.
Hey everyone, sorry about that. It looks like Sheila's audio isn't working. We're going to upload that to the website and on Facebook so everybody can watch it just after this broadcast. And with that, I want to welcome back Andrea to the stage. Thank you, Andrea.
Absolutely. Well, everybody should make sure to watch that because Sheila is a force and she is just fraught with information. So please check back in and hear the valuable words she has to say. Right now, I'm going to show you one more thing to lift yourself anytime. And sometimes as a caregiver, we're just having one of those days where it just feels like so much is going on. And it would be wonderful to be able to find a minute of calm. And the good news is that just like you can generate energy for yourself anytime you really need it, you can also create instant calm anytime you really need it. And here's how, okay? So I want you to just stand up wherever you're at. And we're gonna do a modified tree pose from yoga. So tree pose looks like this, which is very dramatic. We're not going to do that. We're just going to lift one foot. You can lift it 1 foot off the ground. You can use your desk or your table to help you balance, but press your legs together. This oppositional energy that is going to create energy. And I want you to think about that energy coming together and going up through the top of your head. And I want you to just hold here and balance and breathe. And you see, I just fell and I come back. Well, this here in this moment of just breathing and trying to hold this balance requires your brain to focus. And again, we're connecting breath to a physical purpose. And what balancing helps us do is not only calm in this moment and slow our heart rate and get our central nervous system to drop a notch, but we actually train our brain to stop over responding to stress. Let's switch feet. So what's wonderful in this moment is, as you notice, balance is actually very challenging, just like it is in your life. So this is just a really wonderful metaphor for what you're going through as a caregiver, all this push and pull you feel of your muscles. It's very active. And by taking this moment to just accept that push and pull, just allow for it and just stay curious about how long can I be here? Rather than judging that I'm falling, just curious, how long can I do this? How long can I stay focused in this? How much can I just keep breathing and not judging myself, but just allowing myself to do my best in this moment? And now you can rest. As you train your brain to do that physically, it will train your brain to respond to challenge mentally in life. Your brain sees stress as stress, whether it's physical stress or mental stress, circumstantial stress. It's all the same, and it responds the same with adrenaline and cortisol. By taking a moment to balance, you not only find yourself probably in a calmer place right now, but also you've taken a moment to really teach your brain that we don't need to respond to challenge with a lot of extra energy. We just need to focus and stay curious and stay in a place of possibility and just handle things as they come, one item at a time, and we'll be successful. Okay, so I hope you feel grounded and centered right now. And I'm gonna kick it over to another fabulous woman. This is Clorinda Wally. She is the president of Chronic Disease Day, and you can take it away, Clorinda.
Hi there. I always wonder when it's ready to key. Well, thank you so much, Andrea. I can tell you, I'm probably going to be incorporating that very exercise into my routine several times a day. I also want to say thank you to all of our speakers today. Kim, Nadine, Raj, Danelle, Grace, and I'm looking forward to hearing Sheila. Thank you for all you have done to support our communities. We heard so many incredible insights from our amazing group of caregivers and caregiving experts. As previously stated, I am Clorinda Wally, and I certainly appreciate being a part of this organization and appreciate everyone who is joining us today. Our patient community represents a diverse array of people who, without our support, would risk going bankrupt or worse. Since our founding nearly 2 decades ago, Good Days has distributed nearly $2 billion in access to care grants. And given the unique role that Good Days plays in our healthcare system, we are very committed to building deep relationships with the communities and the families that we touch. We also know from personal experience what it feels like to be a caregiver and to need a caregiver. That is because chronic disease impacts all of us. You or someone you know probably has a chronic illness. And now COVID has only widened the cracks in our healthcare system. More people for the first time are having to choose between medicine that can extend their life and everyday necessities like rent and groceries. And caregivers bear these burdens too. Events like this are an opportunity to consider how we can better support ourselves and each other during challenging times. I hope you found today's speakers as insightful as I did. Through these live stream events, we seek to bring together leading voices who can help address issues that impact across the chronic disease community. But we cannot affect meaningful change without your help. With your support, this year's Chronic Disease Day will be the most impactful yet. As we get closer to the big day, we are asking everyone to help us build healthier communities that will increase the lifespans across generations and help us live more good days. And caregiving doesn't stop when we stop talking about it. Someone you know can use the information that we discussed here today, so please share it on your social media. Also, visit chronicdiseaseday.org and tell us who you stay strong for. Share your favorite recipes and get involved. Thank you for watching, and I will see you at our next Chronic Disease Day event. Take care.